Welcome to the Second Time Founders Podcast. This is the first time I'm introducing the podcast. I'm Siki, a very part-time co-host, and I'm joined by Sarah, a very long-time co-host, and the very well-known Sophia Amoruso. Really excited to have you. You've done a lot, so how do you introduce yourself these days?
Gosh, I am the founder and managing partner at Trust Fund, which is an early stage venture fund. And I have an online course called Business Class for entrepreneurs, but mostly bootstrap entrepreneurs. And what else? I have 3 poodles, a lot of work, and I live in Los Angeles.
Fantastic.
And I'm single, but probably not for long.
Not after appearing on this podcast.
No, no. Yeah, we
First
have
founders,
all
that's
time
my
founders.
dream man.
You've heard it here first, folks.
No, I'm
All
Um,
right, now I have a real
no founders. How about no founders?
side project of
these two though.
actually
How about
the
no money? Because that seems to be my real.
Hmm.
All right.
All right. So I'll start. So the way this podcast works is we just talk about random things that we think could be useful to second time founders. Um,
first time founders. We gotta our
not
audience, a lot of
correct.
kind of newer folks who want to hear from us old and wise people.
With
Well,
one caveat, it's like you may know things from listening to this podcast, but you may not apply it until your second company. And that's okay. You may retain this knowledge until you know how to actually apply it. And that's part of being a first time founder. Listening and knowing are only a part of actually doing and executing. So expect to forget a lot of what we're saying, but it's good that you're here.
Love it.
let's start deep. You started an SDL quite a while ago, and it's been a while. What comes top of mind when you think about what do you wish you knew then, and what would you have done differently knowing that?
So yeah, I started Now See Y'all, my first company when I was 22, uh, trying not to work for other people. And I didn't think that was entrepreneurial or ambitious. I thought it was just kind of lazy because I was bad at working for other people. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably find themselves in that situation in different ways in different companies. Hopefully, you're finding yourself in that position in an organization because I had never worked in an office before I started my company. The example of leadership was like, you clocked in, you forgot to clock out. Like that was I had like hourly kind of retail jobs. And so what I wish I had before I started my company was experience as a leader, experience in a workplace, experience, understanding the dynamics of what a career even means because I never meant to have one. I didn't even really know what it meant. And when I started managing people, and then holy shit, I didn't even know I was supposed to be leading them. I was really flying blind, and I didn't have any empathy. Not because I am like an unempathetic person, but because I had never, uh, I'd never had that experience, and I had never needed to be told what to do with my own business. And I thought that people I was paying more than myself would also, self diagnose and show up and cure the business of what it needed. And holding people accountable is really important, regardless if they're making, 60 grand a year or 400 grand a year as your CEO. So I would say that's the biggest one. As cute and serendipitous as it is that like, oh wow, she didn't go to college and eBay and wow, bootstrapped and unlikely story. Cool, that's inspiring. Um, but it's not the best way to go about it. And I I think experience actually matters.
I love that. I always tell people my first job out of college was at Google, so I got to kind of see how a
Yeah.
successful company works. And I always tell people, like, as much as I would love to convince everyone to join my startup, like probably you're going to learn more working for a company that has their shit together in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then go do your startup thing or go work for a startup. But it is really helpful to kind of see people that are amazing at their jobs and are experienced leaders and then learn from that in the beginning.
I wish the people I employed could have learned that from me.
I'm curious with Nasty Gal, like it was just for folks who aren't aware, I'm sure a lot of people know the story, but it was a super popular, high flying company. I mean, I think at one point you were valued at 350 million, maybe even higher. Um, Huge brand, like the name to know, the hottest female founder to know. Um, and then the company went bankrupt at another point. And what I'm curious about is how you would maybe in retrospect, or maybe you did the right thing, like advise founders in terms of taking chips off the table, because there isn't everything has risk. And I think this is something I think about a lot. Over 8 years into this journey, I've taken nothing off the table. I've, also not paid myself particularly well. And I always advise founders, like, don't don't do that if you
Mhm.
can. Um, and at some point, like as a founder, you always believe your business can be much, much bigger and you want to see the biggest outcome and you want to own as much as possible. But is there, advice you would give to folks in terms of how to think about that, how to sort of de-risk your situation as you're gaining
Totally.
this massive
Maybe
valuation?
I'm sitting in this office in my house is because I took secondary in 2012. I didn't even know what that was. Before I answer your question, so funny. This has never happened. I left Nasty at the end of 2016. Somebody sent a return for their like leather shorts to my mailbox, my like private mailbox here in Los Angeles.
What?
They like didn't fit. This is like a week ago. I need to return to sender. It was more than a week ago. But that's, oh, yeah, they need a refund. Fuck, they need a refund. I should just give her a refund. It would be funny. It would be funnier if I Venmoed her. Um,
That
it
is
can't be,
amazing.
it can't be that much. Um, so, I had bootstrapped my company from nothing to a run rate of 28 million, super profitably before I raised money. I didn't like raise it. They like threw it at me because it was a freak show. Nobody does that. And it was scaling at a venture pace, even though it was a fashion business. So it like looked and smelled like a venture backable company. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't called direct to consumer. It was called e-commerce. It was very nascent. Found.com had yet to explode, like blow up, like fail. It was like One Kings Lane and Beachmint. There was no Shopify. It was a different time. The people I admired were Tony Hsieh and then Natalie Massenet from Net Order. And those were the only people I could look to who were doing anything kind of remotely like I was. Um, and so yeah, Index showed up in 2012 and valued the company at 350 million. The first money in was out of a growth fund. I raised $50 million. It was Index and Thrive, and those were the only people on the cap table. Josh Kushner was like a squeaky child. I was like, who? And get Will Gabrick, they came to our office. And I was like, who are you kids? And I think they're actually my age, but men tend to like read. I don't know. It's just like, who gave you all this money? How is um and that was a real shock to the system, like both for me personally, but probably even more, well, maybe even more so to the business, because the company wasn't set up to absorb the expectations and I think almost like the accountability and like speed of execution that had happened naturally for me because I kept my head down and just kept giving people what they wanted and shipped it on time and gave them good customer service. It's not that hard, but when you raise $50 million, when you raise it a $350 million valuation, the expectation is next time you raise, it's going to be at over $1 billion, hoping that people still want to invest in like fashion e-commerce, you know? And so trends can change, what, you're building, Sarah. I don't know the market of what you're building. I think marketplaces are brilliant and I love investing in them.
Well, the good thing about childcare is kids seem to be a thing that doesn't go out of style. People have to keep having them for our society to exist. So
I know, I know.
hopefully,
I liked more of them.
durable.
Um, but it's like in 2 years, something could be unsexy. Venture capital has changed their minds. BuzzFeed, Vice, like, why did we do that? We don't invest in media anymore. We're over allocated in that, sector. And then you're like, oh shit, I'm Vice and I need to raise money, but actually we're valued like a venture company, but we're not. And so raising a high valuation can really fuck you. I didn't know that raising a 10x plus valuation in 2012 would be kind of like an early nail in the coffin. It took me a really long time to figure that out. But that
Mm.
can happen when you raise a too high of a valuation. I didn't have competing term sheets. It was like negotiating at a flea market. Danny was like, this much for this much. And I was like, this much for this much. And we were like, okay. And it was like over the phone. And then I got a term sheet. I didn't really have to, I didn't have to raise money. Um, and, it was when I met Jeff Jordan. He flew to LA in 2012 to come to our offices. Same thing with like Jeremy Liu. And it was amazing just to even start building a network of, top tier, like Jeff and Jeremy are both LPs trust fund now. So it was a really, really valuable thing to do. Both in that I was able to take secondary, which wound up being like the only money I've ever made, other than like a book, which was like such a fraction of that. Um, and that I was able to kind of seed these relationships
Yep.
that have become really valuable and people who've become mentors at the time. There's more reasons than just funding a company, I think, to take venture capital if you have a really good firm. And Index was a really good firm. And, Drew Houston and Dick Costello and, all of these amazing, folks were sitting at like the poker table with me in, maybe 2013 at Calistoga Ranch at the Index offsite. And like, that's a whole different kind of value. Um, Ultimately, that shock to the system, even operationally, became something where it was like, oh shit, we had to hire 100 people in a year. The expectation was literally, I had like a COO, I had top tier, venture investor on my board, only person on my board other than me until almost the end, saying, let's round up by 100 million. And so our goal for the next year was 128 million, not 129, not 122, literally just rounded up by $100 million and hired over 100 people. Eventually built it to over 100 million in revenue, not profitably, with bloat and dollar a piece business cards because our art director was like snobby. And I had no idea what I was fucking doing. And it was the best ride, the most fun. I've had the most fun. But also something that like, I couldn't see past what I was doing and didn't know how to fucking lead people. Um, so in terms of taking chips off the table, that was supposed to be like child's play compared to what I was gonna make.
Right.
So I didn't take 50 million off the table. But I took the company didn't need to raise money. I owned 80% of the company when it was worth $350 million.
Right.
So on paper I was worth so much that like the money I had taken was just like, oh cool, this is just like, this is just like funny money that I'll start blowing as if I'm worth, $280 million,
Right.
which is not blown. I have a lot of equity in my home. And I still need to work, which is probably a good thing because I'd be a freak if I had probably made that much money or more. Like, I just wonder whose boat I would be on.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's something I think a founder should consider doing when you've already built something, um, largely on merit and not because you can raise at a high valuation. Optimizing for ownership, I think is just kind of dumb. Like, you could own 10% of a business, and if you build it with the right people and the right investors that are valuing you at something that's reasonable along the way, even with taking that dilution, you are setting yourself up to, hit realistic milestones and be able to raise money at, um, at a price that you haven't priced yourself out of with a prior round. So thinking long term and not and ignoring the glamour of a crazy valuation is really important. Because you have to know what happens next for you to be able to raise again. And you're probably going to blow a lot of money getting there. Um, and just to finish, um, what's cool is that the valuations that entrepreneurs are seeing now are a lot more in line. You know, Though for the most part, maybe outside of like AI or something, like keep them accountable just by the nature of the market right now. Um, and the word profitability is now like that was not a after they invested. That was just not a word. That's not a word I ever heard in the venture world. So it's cool and encouraging uh, to hear that word. And as someone who very substantially bootstrapped a business, something that who knew now as a venture investor is something that I understand, which I think probably very few of us do.
I really resonated with what you're saying about optimizing for ownership. That's like seems like a really common first time founder mistake. And the way I explain it is these are kind of binary outcomes. Half of a really large amount of money is still a large amount of money. And 100% of $0 is still $0. And you want to optimize for making it work.
Yeah, I was on the
Um,
cover of Forbes and I was richer than Beyonce.
it's
Not,
amazing.
yeah, like
Um, I think for the benefit of most of our listeners, I just imagine when you're a first time founder and something is starting to work and someone is handing you a check for a lot of money. So we actually share an investor. Jeremy Liu also invested in my first company. And I also had $0 in the bank and offered me secondary, which I took in that first company. And I just remember thinking, here's a person who's giving me a lot of money. Um, what did it feel like in the moment? And how do you think a founder first time around can make wiser decisions than you did or even I did during or after the fundraising process?
I mean, just don't do it early on. Like I invested in Pipe and I'm pretty sure like Harry Hurst is buying lattes with his secondary, Like that was a crazy valuation and something I like regret isn't investing in. Um,
You and
as
I
an
both.
as an angel. Um,
I
I
believe,
don't
yeah.
I don't think it's like a great look. I think you gotta have built something first. If somebody offers it to you, great. But like don't like don't be greedy. Like good things come in time and you won't understand why you have these things if you haven't built something that when you look at your bank account makes sense. And I don't think it ever makes sense when you make a shitload of money and you didn't have a shitload of money before that. I mean, it was like dive bars and burritos. And then it was like, I'm buying the table wine and oysters on me or whatever, and it was like, oh, I'm going to buy a mattress. I'm going to get a $30,000 fucking horsehair mattress. Um, which was great, but it's in storage now because my ex wanted like something Tempur-Pedic. Um, so when you do make money, I'd say just like don't spend it. I think a lot of people are good at that. I inflated my life. I have 3 poodles because I had a fucking full-time housekeeper and a shut-in husband, you know? Like I have to deal with 3 poodles now and I live alone. it's fine. They're awesome, but it's like nuts. So
Yeah.
don't build your life assuming that everything's going to work out because chances are it's not. And if it does, awesome, but keep your feet on the ground. Like,
I feel like the meta here is that, you know, we have we are people with more experience than we had before. I remember when I didn't have experience, it was hard to appreciate even the value of experience. I actually actively devalued experience. I thought, I'm young, I have a fresh perspective, and
yeah, I can just
gold
like,
parts with experience with the suits. I don't need them.
just like paint.
And yeah, and now do you have some, you're like, oh, experience is super valuable, right? And I guess like the meta question here is that, you know, when you don't have a lot of experience, how do you even learn to appreciate the value of experience?
Yeah. Um, I mean, if to answer your last question, because I feel like I didn't, what did it feel like to make that money? It was surreal. I paid a lot in taxes and I paid off my mom's mortgage. Like, what else am I going to do? I bought a house so I could have like friends over and swim. Like, I took friends on trips. Like, if having money is like by yourself is like whatever, being able to take your friend to fucking Amangiri for her birthday, that's amazing, which I can't do anymore. Probably because I did that. But like, you know, going to the south of France with a friend and buying matching Hermes scarves like a dork, before you get on the plane at duty free. It's just like amazing. But like, so it's amazing. It's amazing. But just, be careful what you do with your money and don't get too excited about yourself and whatever. Keep your head down and keep working. Um, in terms of your last question, okay, can you ask it again? Um,
Yeah. I mean, how do you appreciate the value of experience
how
when
do
you don't?
yeah. Um, I mean, experience is only as good as what you do with it and as good as what the people you hire do with it. And experience is only as good as how well you hold the people who have experience around you um, do with it. I don't know how to finish that sentence, but you get it. Like, experience is great. Experience can be, living out, like showing up and living out your past when you give advice to other people and not tempering it with the fact that like that's your story. Or when you take advice from experienced people, knowing that they're just speaking through like a very specific filter and experience, and their damage isn't your damage and it may not be your experience. So just like always understanding the caveat of like, everyone's had like probably a pretty wildly different experience, but there are like truisms, I guess. And I think what we're talking about are a lot of them. And I don't want to be like, I'm right. We know. Right. But like, that's why people listen to podcasts because we're supposed to. But but those things are real. And that's not like based on one founder's experience. We're talking about taking money off the table. We're talking about, ownership and valuations and choosing investors and the value of experience. And like, those aren't like, those are opinions and shared experiences that
Right.
many, many founders share. So I'd
Have
say
you guys
like,
heard Paul
yeah,
Buchheit's definition of experience?
no,
It's
I
like
don't.
Paul Buchheit's definition of Gmail. It's my favorite one. He has this equation: experience equals limited life experiences plus overgeneralizations equals experience.
Yeah,
Pretty-
There's a quote, and you can like edit this for a second. Have you heard of this song by the director Baz Luhrmann called Sunscreen?
Nope.
And it's really beautiful. It's better if you just read it because it's not like good music. And it's something he read at a like some kind of he wrote and read at
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
This was
class.
like a very popular song for a while.
I didn't know about it until this man um sent it to me and read it out loud to me, which was kind of cool. But he says advice is, let's see here. Um okay. Be careful whose advice you buy, but be patient with those who supply it. Advice is a form of nostalgia. Dispensing it is a way of fishing the past from the disposal, wiping it off, painting over the ugly parts, and recycling it for more than it's worth.
Ooh.
It's really
Well,
good. Like
Oh,
sunscreen,
that hit.
bad
I feel like this is a good segue into what you're doing now, which is you've kind of transitioned to the dark side. No, I'm just joking. We love VCs, but you have a fund now called Trust Fund, which I imagine is a kind of play on, making fun of trust funds and people who have them. Uh, but how is it different than the average VC bro, or how maybe you love VCs and you think they're all amazing and you want to be just like them. Uh,
Um,
Tell us about that.
I'm doomed and possessed not to be like them. I'm not like committed to not being like them because the majority of VC like bros, I guess, that I've met, like don't really seem like bros to me. I know that's like a trope, but lots of people I've met through venture are like incredibly like nurturing mentors. And I don't know if it's just 'cause I'm a girl and I think it's like, oh, or something, but like the venture world like runs on like virtue and like sharing and giving other people access and giving entrepreneurs the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to like build something incredible that could change the world and give people, a marketplace where they can make money and they can go to work and have their child cared for. Like without a platform like that, like you're like that's life changing for two sides of the equation. I mean, you know this, but like it's like what software can do is it's like such a beautiful thing. And I'm not like I'm not like an engineer and I built a consumer business, but I was also the end user of
Right.
a product like eBay that completely changed my life. Um, so I haven't experienced that. Um, and, you know, people like Rob Hayes, who's also an LP, um, or, Jeff Jordan, like are guys that I've just like sat with and not like ever pitched really. I think I pitched Andreessen once, but Jeff wasn't in the room. That was cool. Being told no by Andreessen was like better than being told yes by anybody else. Like just being in that room for me was like being like a weird fan, having like, Mark and Ben there, and Mark's also an LP and so is Chris. Okay, I'll stop. Um
Oh my.
and we're cool. We're lucky. We're rare. And it also doesn't mean we're good at our jobs. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to raise a $30 million round and those guys are going to go. People.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this perception of venture capitalists are like just these rich dudes that are dispensing money. But at the end of the day, like VCs have a job to do. They take money from their LPs and they have to invest it in companies they think are going to return the fund and then some. They're not, you know, bad guys out for blood. They're actually enabling all this kind of innovation that can't happen in any other industry because you don't have these, big infusions of capital like you see in venture. So I agree. Like they're not bad guys. They're good guys. They're all part of the ecosystem and on our side. And I think, that there historically has been a lack of diversity, which I think has contributed to this bad rap. But we're starting to see more incredible women and diverse investors rise to the top. We have a number of, women. We have majority women on our cap table, so I'm lucky to kind of have amazing investors that I can really relate to. But yeah, I think you're right. Like these are amazing people that are enabling great innovation to happen.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, I
but
think.
yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to say that I think that's not a popular belief with first time founders in particular. There's this like weird internal power dynamic feeling,
Yeah.
and that actually doesn't help founders raise money, right? Like I think the more helpful and I think actually correct way of thinking about the investor relationship is they actually have a much tougher job than you in any given fundraising meeting. because if their job to sell you as a founder, their liquid US dollar that buys the same shit as everyone else's liquid US dollar. Um, and yeah, I think like a lot of founders come into this with this like weird power dynamic feeling of like insecurity and somewhat of a chip on their shoulder, and it ends up not being productive for either party.
And the one thing I'll say that even the coolest, most helpful investors can be guilty of is the fact that there's just a conflict of interest. They've got bosses and they want to retain, the valuation that they invested in your company at, which ultimately, we wound up in, valuation purgatory and then cock blocked for like, down rounds, which was, not even at with a vote,
Yeah.
but kind of like spiritually in conversations that I wasn't privy to, where like a possible awesome investors like kind of vanished because they weren't willing to pay $350 million. And this is because when your venture investor, shows up at their AGM, which is their big conference presentation for their LPs, or the people giving them money, it's in their best interest to show that what they invested in is at worst still worth what it was before. And that can really starve you out. Or it's in their best interest. I mean, and it's even more in their best interest that they've marked up their investment. And what value means is like debatable, or what something's worth um, is debatable when there's like, largely one party setting a price for something, and it's their job to make your company more expensive than it was when they put in their first check. And that's something just to be really aware of as um, get term sheets and, valuations, and take advice on whether to or to not raise money and how much to, and um, at what price.
Yeah, I think that like understanding the motivations is really key. And I think investors, oh, do we lose Siki? Hopefully he's coming right back.
Should we
Uh,
just wait a second? Okay.
yeah, Riverside is good at kind of stitching everything together. He's back and better than ever.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry about that. Weird power issue.
I think investors are generally like incentivized to, see how big a company can get as quickly as possible. They have a portfolio approach, and founders have one company, and they're incentivized to make that thing as valuable as possible ultimately, but not at the expense of dying, because that's their only shot at goal. And so, I've been fortunate that I think my investors are really aligned with where we are, and early stage investors tend to be more aligned on the grand scheme of things. But there is that tension between like, I want this thing to last forever and be a long standing company that, my kids use when they have children, and my investors, need to return the fund. So
Yeah.
I get that tension is always going to be there.
And also, they have a lot of founders they're supporting. And when you're not the winner, they're not going to fix your company for you.
Right.
Um, so like their nature and a lot of like their responsibility in some ways is to focus on the companies that are doing better. And some of them just aren't. The majority of them won't. And so some of them are going to dig in and, deal with the bloodbath that now happening because all their companies raised at like way too high of a valuation a few years ago. And some of them are going to do that and stop deploying and dig in and, preserve what they've invested in and what you've built. But other ones are going to go spend time with the founders and the companies that are the most promising, because they're not going to fix it for you. And that's what happened to me. And as much as I hated it, I wonder what's going to happen when my portfolio, there's, some of them are killing it and raising, rounds and, I can be really helpful. What I can't be helpful with is turning a company around. Clearly, mine went fucking bankrupt. So like I'm not investing like I'm investing in the early stage because it's what I'm good at. And I think I'll want to be like upfront increasingly with founders as I invest in them that if things plateau or go sideways, like I'm going to be as helpful as I can with what I am capable of, but I may not like be there for you in 5 years because I've got a whole bunch of other early stage companies and I'm,
Yeah.
not investing at you Series C. And you've got a whole bunch of other shit that like at this point I'm probably not even that privy to because you're like reporting to investors who write you way bigger checks. It's
Yeah, it
kind
was
of
interesting.
there's a mercenary element to the job. It's fucking money. It's your job to return money. So there's that.
Yeah, when the SVB bank collapse happened a year ago, which is now ancient history for everyone, our company was entirely, all of our money was in SVB. And we didn't have access to it and we couldn't make payroll and, all the drama. But, uh, when shit hit the fan, like my investors certainly rolled up their sleeves and were like, "Look, we got to figure out how to help you." But in the interim, I put the whole company on my credit cards and I looked in my personal bank account and I was like, is there anyone else who's opening up their personal bank account to me right now? And like that was kind of the wake up call for me that we need to get profitable because ultimately it's on me. Um, and this is like I'm the only one that will die for this business. Probably no one else will give their life savings or their life to this. And I think that's right. Like investors shouldn't. That would be crazy. You have a portfolio to think about. You have, all your kids to live for. But, you got to realize that tension
Yeah.
will be there.
And I also think like it's a lot easier for an investor to justify digging in and supporting when there's like a macro thing going on like SVB or the economy shifting when
Right.
like when your company is just tanking and you
Yeah.
it's like,
I-
it depends on like what's going on and how unique your like struggle is.
I think
Well,
there's
what's interesting to me is you were able to maintain like even though you kind of had this experience of sort of everyone disappearing when shit hit the fan, you've maintained these relationships and now, these people are your LPs and you obviously really like them and respect them. And, I think that's pretty rare that you were able to kind of
I
maintain
mean,
good relationships.
it was really only indexed on my cap table, so my
As
experience is
but
indexed,
but they're
but
are
everyone
they
else
now
really
LPs
bounced.
like the
Like
people from Index
losing
or no?
money is also part of their job.
Oh,
So the folks in my, I thought I'd be this like pariah, but Lightspeed led, the seed round in my next company, which was called Girl Boss. So, yeah, it's like not everybody bails, but, maybe the books on your cap table, um, will spend their time elsewhere. And I kind of don't blame them.
I think there's like a difference between, naturally, if a company's doing less well, you're going to spend, given the companies are doing great, a lot more attention. That makes sense. I think there's a difference between that and just like bad behavior in when things are going well. Like if you have a lifeline to a round of bridge funding and they're blocking it, that's just like straight up bad behavior.
right.
And I think like for a first time founder, that's really important to suss out, right? Because, what you quickly learn is that the when things are going well, everyone's great. Everyone is the nicest, your best buddy. But like when shit hits a fan, you see shit, right? Like on my second company, when we were shutting down, it was stark how the best investors, how they went out of their way to be supportive and they didn't have to be.
Mhm.
And I don't expect that from every investor, but the ones that you expected, you were close to, ended up making it so difficult and operate and optimizing every dollar and penny. And knowing that upfront is like highly valuable to you as a founder when you're raising.
And honestly, we're talking about optimizing for ownership. Like, just own your company, and that'll never happen. Like, if you control your business, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, um, so that's, I guess, on the flip side, it's like bootstrap it as far as you can, sell a minority stake, and run the show.
Yeah. That's right. Um, when you are on that other side of the table, what are you looking for in a founder that is different and informed by your set of experiences as a founder?
Love second time founders. So everyone who's listening, just go fuck up and then call me. Just kidding. I love second time founders. I've got like two of my co-founders in one company called Agree, which is this amazing like legal tech platform they're building. Are both three times found. They both have three exits independently under their belts. Like that's insane. You know, I look for people who are like beasts. I want to know that this person's going to show up and do what it takes when things aren't great. Like, um, I want to say like work life balance and shit like that. But it's like, no, don't raise venture capital if you expect work life balance. And I know that's like toxic, but I'm just going to like, I just still can't. I'm not going to give people like, bullshit advice. Like, you have to be someone who's confident, um, can raise money, can, be charismatic enough or Asperger's-y and brilliant enough to like, um, convince people in the room that what you're building is going to be really special. Um, and I think people who are like really, who feel like a deep, like have a deep understanding of or experience with what it is that they're building and ideally have felt pain. And so in my LP deck, I summarize that by killers building painkillers.
Mm, I love it. Wow.
Well,
I got to use that for my next pitch deck.
I like almost haven't shared it because it's so good.
Really good. Now we're all going to see, like, you're going to see that in everyone's deck now.
it is now on my Twitter. That is my thing now.
Yes, the new bio.
You can amplify it. I'll get a follow.
We'll give you credit.
Thank
We
you.
don't plagiarize. You can get in trouble now for plagiarizing, I hear.
So
Yeah.
you do a lot of pitches now. I imagine from a lot of first time founders too. What do people get wrong about fundraising, the process, the pitch?
I mean, if you send me, there's a company I passed on, came out of YC. It's like a $25 million valuation. They've hardly built anything. Really smart founders. Great experience. Their deck was like 6 slides long and they had no articulation of go to market. And it was like pre-seed at like a seed plus valuation. And that's just like, there are people who are going to invest, but like, again, ownership, price, like, you want me? Give me the last round's valuation. And that has happened a few times. But I think like, showing up and being like overconfident, being confident is important, but like being like almost like just not their level of confident is
Mm,
like, and
mm,
that's kind of that's a little broy, and I haven't seen a ton of it, but when I do, it's like, where's the knock knock? Like, where's the person? And I like need to see the person.
yeah.
Um,
The
I want,
person inside is probably insecure.
yeah, it's really cool when they can show up and answer any question I have or say like, let me get back to you. Uh, like the more they know, the better. And then be able to articulate like, all right, well, how's this a bazillion-dollar company? Because you can bootstrap this or raise money from a different kind of investor, but like we're here to take big swings and build, crazy shit that's going to change, the lives of a lot of families, right? Like there's a lot of families what you're building. So I think like audacious but not overconfident, and not greedy. Um really understand what it is that they're doing, not just because it's like an opportunity, like, but have an understanding of what they're doing, not because of like a statistic or some research, but because they really understand it. Ideally, like on a cellular level, ideally on a traumatic level.
Lean.
So,
Lean.
like, if building a company can be therapeutic, like,
Yeah.
I think it's called a chip on your shoulder, whatever it is, like, let it, let it, let it run.
Well, I think we're almost out of time. Are there any parting words or thoughts or things we didn't cover that we should have?
You can pitch me at trustfund.vc. Really helpful. Like this job. Uh, uh, what else?
Can people pitch you that don't have a warm intro?
Yeah, I invested in. I like was the first check into that company I just mentioned with those three-time founders who submitted and I look at all of them, but I was like, how do founders? Which is mean that I'm doing a good job marketing.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, I mean, get in any way that you can. Warm intros are nice, but articulate what it is that you're doing well. So when someone clicks on your deck, they want it. That's the main thing. It's like know what you're doing and know how to articulate it, and then send it to me.
Amazing. How else can people find you on the internet?
Well, there's some naked photos really, really deep in the internet. Just kidding.
Shark web.
And whatever. At Sophia Amoruso, probably spelled out somewhere on where you're finding this podcast. On
Yes.
everything. Trust funds, like, I don't know, trustfund.vc on Instagram, trustfundvc on Twitter.
What's your air chat?
Do you know about AirChat?
I don't know.
You got to get on
No,
air.
I have it. I'm like,
Okay.
what?
I already churned. I got a new phone yesterday and I did not migrate over to my new phone.
I like listening to Naval talk, but I can do that anywhere. Like, so, what else? Yeah, that's it. I have a newsletter. You can go to sophiaamoruso.com/newsletter and check it out. And then,
Nice.
send me an email.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was like, I should give you my email address. It's just team@trustfund.vc. I'm
Great.
all of it. I'll just pretend like that's my email address.
Love
Oh.
it.
Well, thanks so much for coming on,
Okay.
Sophia.
Thank you. It's fun.
you.
Always fun.
All right.